All right, welcome to round three. We got Craig Maisley on Grizzlebrand Oath versus Terrence McElvey on Blue-Black Jace Vault. So Craig Maisley playing a list pretty similar to what I would play, and as far as Oath goes, is pretty much like one card different than what I like to run. He's got the main deck Nature's Claim. I like main deck Abrupt Decay a little more. I think it's a little more versatile, but it's all about your play style. Versus the Blue-Black Jace Vault list with the Tinker Inkwell Leviathan plan going on. He's probably had one too many bad experiences with Hurkyl's Recall.
Well, Hurkyl's will still
that'll
get it.
still get it.
It'll
yeah.
still get it. But yeah, as far
Steel
as
Sabotage.
And other Jaces.
Jaces, yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways of dealing with Blightsteel, even though it's indestructible. Not a lot of ways of dealing with Inkwell.
Nope.
So Craig's list is, I definitely like it. I think it's very strong. I think Abrupt Decay is a fantastic answer to Grafdigger's Cage, which is a card you're going to have to answer.
Definitely.
What I would like to see more of is Duress or Thoughtseize type effects, preferably Duress in a Oath list. I think what that does is it allows you to clear the way for Oath and to know how good your line is going to be. It can allow you to hold back a few turns, dig for more counters. The information is very valuable in a deck like Oath because you're just trying to resolve that one spell and get an untapped step and get the activation. And from there, it's very difficult to lose.
And touching on what you mentioned about as far as hating through the Grafdigger's Cage, he's also got two main deck show and tells with a third in the sideboard.
Yeah, that allows you to Oath and then draw the Grizzlebrand for turn. You'll still be able to Oath as normal, but it just won't go from the top of your deck into the battlefield. And you can also just cast them. That's a totally relevant plan. So we've got some just power on board so far. That's the way to start. Mox Jet, and on the other side we have Mox Sapphire into Ancestral, Force of Will pitching Jace. So we've got some non-power cards, but certainly nothing cheap so far. These are all heavy-hitting cards.
So in order for Craig, was Craig on the play? In order for him to keep a hand of just Mox Jet, he really needs to have like Oath in hand or like a bunch of gas in order for that to be a reasonable keep.
I'm not sure that it's reasonable to keep even with those cards.
Right.
You look at how light his mana base is, and then figure if he's going to hit another mana source. I mean, really, he has to hit an Orchard. It's not even like another mana source. Just getting a tropical island into an Oath here is not going to be a game breaker.
No.
So this is a crazy game. We only have Moxes on board. I am not sure what to think of this so far. This is pretty crazy.
Terrence chose not to play his Sol Ring last turn to keep up, looks like Spell Snare in his hand, which is a pretty relevant card against Oath. Now, right here, he chooses to tap down his black-blue instead of his mono-blue. Maybe for fear of getting wastelanded, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure what reason you'd have for that. I mean, Nature's Claim could potentially break things up. Like if he drew Lotus, he could Nature's Claim the Sapphire. Go to no, he couldn't go to second main because he'd lose his mana too.
Yeah.
I'm scrambling for a reason why it would be super relevant. Thirst for Knowledge. There we go.
Let's get some card advantage. Discard maybe an off-color Mox.
So it looks like a really, really questionable keep with Craig. I think he just believed in the heart of the cards a little bit too much there.
Yep.
Was hoping to just rip into pure goodness for every draw step. And Terrence is starting to really pull away here.
Getting rid of a Spell Snare and a Hurkyl's Recall. I saw him rip a Tolarian Academy. Next turn, that's going to be pretty sweet. He's got the Merchant Scroll in hand so that he can cast Yawgmoth's Will.
Does he have the Yawgmoth's Will?
No, well, in his list.
Oh, I see.
Because he's got Merchant. Well, you can't
Merchant
search
Scroll for Mystical.
Instant for Mystical. There we go.
You could Merchant Scroll for Mystical. That would be a little bit of a circuitous way of getting there, but he could certainly do it. What went to the front there? Was that Yawg-Will? Does he already have it?
He already has it.
He already has it.
So
he's fine.
Yeah.
No problem.
Things are looking up.
I mean, I guess you Merchant Scroll before the Yawg-Will just to get even more goodness in there.
Maybe a Brainstorm or whatever.
I guess a Force of Will if you don't have one. That would also be good. Or a Flusterstorm.
Yep.
Yeah, there's lots of options.
Is that a Time Walk or is that the scroll?
That's the scroll on the front there.
Yeah, so he's scrolling. And he's got, let's see, 1, 2. He's got a colorless and a blue floating. Gonna Time Walk. That seems pretty good.
No, he's
not
gonna Time Walk.
No.
Because it's not an instant. Oh, he gets blue instants.
Yeah.
That's an error. Craig catches it though.
Yeah.
So we're fine.
Let's get the Vamp. No, not the Vamp.
Oh no!
Not the Vamp.
Just
Sorry.
so far ahead.
Sorry, Terrence.
I hope he doesn't get Tinker next. Tinker, that would be too much. What do we get? I mean, Drain, Mystical.
There
All
you
right,
go.
there we go. That is a card you can get.
It's okay, Terrence. I was on the get Yawgmoth's Will plan.
So Mystical for Time Walk,
Yep.
totally fine. Now when he Yawg wills, he can Ancestral into Time Walk, or he can just Time Walk the next turn here. Let's see if he's got any other card drawing.
I would say maybe like go for the Tinker. Does he have Tinker in hand?
Well, he can Mystical for Tinker the next turn.
He can Mystical for Tinker.
So the problem, though, it is going to be relevant in terms of the clock that this thing can set. Inkwell is not going to close the game out like Blightsteel. So typically what you would want to do here is just survive one turn, untap, then you're going to Yawg Will, Mystical for Tinker, Ancestral, Time Walk, and be able to get an attack step in with Blightsteel, and you'll be fine. Here, even if he double Time Walks, it's still not going to be lethal. That's only going to be 14 damage.
Yeah, he's got to hope to set up some sort of Time Vault key scenario with his Tinker.
Then at that point, anything would have won. Like, you didn't even need the Tinker at that point. So, oh, I see what you're saying. You think he's just going to completely ignore the robot plan and just try and assemble Vault Key instead?
Right, and I mean, you tinker away the Sapphire, and then you get to replay it. You know, if you do it before you cast Yawgmoth's Will.
Yeah, I was picturing him using Mystical Tutor to go get Tinker. We saw that it was still in the deck, and he's got Time Walk on top. So he's not going to be able to Tinker twice. Now he could... Yeah, he really can't... I can't see a line where he can pull it all together without drawing some kind of goodness off of an Ancestral.
Yeah.
We've got a Time Walk, and that'll get Spell Snared.
Boom.
Yeah, Spell Snare is one of those cards
counter.
I haven't played in Vintage with any seriousness. It seems to me like a card that if you're running a ton of them, you're going to counter some two casting cost spells, but there's going to be times where they're completely dead.
Yeah.
And if you only run one, it just seems like you're not going to have it when you need it.
Right.
So I haven't been crazy about it. There's just so many one-mana spells in Vintage right now. Misstep, Flusterstorm, Spell Pierce, Red Elemental Blast, Duresses. They all do very similar things.
Even Swan Song.
Yeah, Swan Song's an option too for an Oath deck for certain. I think it's an interesting choice. I tend to come down on the side of Flusterstorm in that because you're trying to push through your spells.
Terrence, not worried about using colorless mana on that Yawgmoth's Will.
Yeah, that is probably incorrect. He probably should have used the Soul Ring there.
If he fetched first too, he could have made a land drop.
Yep. So a couple of little technical issues here, costing him incremental advantage. He's very far ahead. It can be difficult when you're so far ahead to catch all of that stuff, which is why, the more you play, it kind of becomes muscle memory and you don't have to think about all of those plays.
I don't even want to admit on camera how many times I've done things like that. It's a lot.
So he's going to be able to Mystical here, and let's see what he goes with. He's considering Demonic Tutor. That would allow him to get Time Vault or Voltaic Key. He's got the Vamp Tutor. I think he really wants to cast that Vamp Tutor. That probably.
It's less mana.
Well, I just mean because he tried to get to a Merchant Scroll.
Oh yeah.
Just probably really, really wants to cast it still. I mean, he did get the Time Walk.
Yeah.
So you're not going to let me cheat. I will get them anyways. There's nothing you can do about it. So we've got Demonic Tutor. That's going to go on top. He's going to be able to Ancestral into it. Let's see where he goes from there.
Yeah. Now, the fact that he used his Tolarian Academy to cast his Yawgmoth's Will is really going to hurt him here because he's only going to be able to Demonic into Ancestral or Time Walk into Ancestral instead of because he's going to end up with an extra colorless mana that he can't use.
And on top of that, what it does is it devalues all of the acceleration you could potentially draw off of it. So if you draw something like Voltaic Key or Moxes, did he actually draw Voltaic Key?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, that's a beating. Yeah.
Well, now he has a use for that colorless mana.
Yeah, that's true. Well, he can play the Voltaic Key and then he can untap and get colored mana if he wanted. He's got Time Vault and Key. Oh, so he actually would have just won if he had the one extra mana.
Yeah.
So he's got a pass.
He doesn't have the Force in hand either.
Did he make a land drop? don't think he
I
did.
don't think he made a land drop. He didn't play Time Walk.
So lots of little things he could have done there. Now, if Craig draws Abrupt Decay here, it is an absolute blowout.
Yep. The punishment. But it looks like Craig's got Oath Go. No,
Oh,
Demonic Tutor. Maybe for Black Lotus into Yawgmoth's Will would be pretty cool. I don't know exactly what else is in his hand, but that's a line I could see
that would be
doing
spicy.
stuff.
Yeah, if he can Yawgmoth's Will, then he'd be able to replay it. Then he'd be able to Demonic Tutor and Time Walk, untap Abrupt Decay, completely undo everything Terrence was able to do on his turn. Well, the mana acceleration aside,
Yeah.
break up Vault Key, Yawgmoth's Will is no longer a factor. It doesn't look like he's got any way of recouping that from the graveyard. That would be very unusual.
He did grab the Lotus.
Lotus Yawgwill? Let's live the dream here.
One time. And he has a land in his graveyard too. He has a fetch land. So.
Yeah. Oh, he'll be able to DT and Time Walk. So he gets to go get the Abrupt Decay and get the untap step. This is a nightmare situation. Terrence definitely had it wrapped up, made a couple of tiny little technical errors, and Craig is able to exploit that here. And it looks like he's going to completely stabilize. So he's able to get black, DT, grab Abrupt Decay, and Time Walk.
Oh, no Time Walk.
Oh, well, that's a mistake.
It's another way to do it.
Yeah, I definitely disagree with that. I'd much rather get the untap step and get the extra card.
That's one of those things where he probably was thinking in the back of his head, he had a little voice like, oh, well, Abrupt Decay can't get countered, Time Walk can get countered, but at that point, like, Terrence would have just countered the Yawgwill.
Yeah, I think you've got to make that play. I think it's possible that Terrence could have not countered the Yawgwill and not countered the DT, but it's such a small chance.
Yeah. So now Terrence has to think of a way to win. He's got to resolve a Jace or grab a Tinker for his Inkwell, but that's going to turn on the Oath that Craig must have in his hand, otherwise I don't see why he would have kept. I think I would go with the Jace plan here, because it lets you draw extra cards every turn, it lets you, for a little while you just draw some cards, and then once you have significant card advantage, you can just Fate Seal.
But he opts for
goes for the Tinker plan.
Getting rid of the Voltaic Key.
No longer useful.
No value to him there.
He does have a Sensei's Top in the 75, doesn't he?
He does. He does. I probably get rid of the Sapphire there. The Voltaic Key actually produces mana by untapping Soul Ring.
Yep.
So I think that's a better line. Now, that's Shroud on Inkwell, if I remember correctly, not Hexproof. I don't think Hexproof was out when they printed that card.
No, yeah, it's Shroud, Trample, Island Walk.
Yeah, that sounds right.
7/10? Something like that.
It might be a 7/11.
Yeah. Sundering Titan's the 7/10.
It is, yeah. They used to call that deck 7/10 split with the Sundering Titan and the Shivan Reefs.
Shivan Reef.
Yeah, you know what blocks Inkwell Leviathan all day? Harn.
Yeah, he does.
All day long. It's
0/8.
brutal.
Long hair, don't care.
Yeah, we do. James just showed us here Island Walk, Trample, Shroud. 7/11.
So Oath is going to be a pretty relevant play right here. Just going to bait out that mana drain. Maybe. No.
That's only going to get
That's a misstep.
3-mana
Show and Tell. And that's going to get a mana drain right there. So now I'd say the game is basically wrapped up. Craig's going to have one turn. He would need to get his Voltaic Key and Time Vault going in order to win the game at this point. Jace won't do it. Grizzlebrand won't do it. Grizzlebrand actually.
Island Walk.
Island Walk, yeah. Grizzlebrand won't do it.
Yeah, this is
Brainstorming
pretty
on
much
his
over.
turn, playing around Flusterstorm.
Yeah, barring Emrakul somehow sneaking into his deck, he's pretty well all set. Nothing's going to do 15 to him during his upkeep, so that's that. So that was a interesting game.
Yeah.
Looked like some questionable keeps and a couple of little plays back and forth. I mean, it really illustrates how important those decisions can be in Vintage. I think, obviously Terrence could have won on his turn. Craig could have actually gotten on tap step and an extra card, which could have been hugely relevant.
Terrence wouldn't have drawn that mana drain.
Yeah, yeah. So that's really just the butterfly effect right through that whole matchup. Tiny decisions making a huge impact, and that's what I love about the format. I think that's the most exciting part is you can constantly get better, and there's never even a match that I play where I can't think of different things that I could have done a little bit better. Certainly not an entire tournament. So Craig's sideboard looks like he has access to Pithing Needle, Abrupt Decay, Steel Sabotage, Hercule's Recall, Nature's Claim, Show and Tell. More than likely, Show and Tell is going to come in almost every matchup. That's one of those cards that allows you to play around the Grafdigger's Cages and all the things that stop Oath of Druids. Hercule's Recall, I don't think he's going to be afraid of the Inkwell Leviathan. I mean, even though he saw it and he knows that he's not going to be able to answer it with something like a Nature's Claim, I still think it's going to be absolutely fine with him if his opponent's spending the mana to tinker.
Definitely. I think I like bringing in Abrupt Decay in this matchup. When your opponent has 1 and 2 mana artifacts that can win the game, Dark Confidence that can get you the incremental card advantage when you need to play the control role. Cards that can come out. Probably the Nature's Claim because it's counterable and it's not hugely relevant. Maybe Misdirection because it's card disadvantage in this kind of a matchup. Yeah, I really see bringing in like 2 cards.
Yeah, Misdirection versus an opponent that could potentially have Abrupt Decay is a lot better because that allows you to get around the uncounterable element of Abrupt Decay.
Right.
When you're up against an Esper list, it's really not as threatening. It doesn't even have Deathrite Shaman to make you think that maybe he has access to it. So he's pretty safe there. I think Misdirection could come out. Really, it's just to push through something like an Oath of Druids, potentially snag an Ancestral. It's definitely a card that you could consider cutting. Mindbreak Trap I'd probably cut before Misdirection, but
oh yeah, that's right. I missed that.
Cutting around the edges, you pretty much just want to figure out what you definitely need. The only card that I'd say he absolutely has to bring in is the Show and Tell. On Terrence's side, he's got a lot of Graveyard Hate, Rest in Peace, and Leyline of the Void, along with Steel Sabotage, Shattering Blow, Swords to Plowshares, and Extirpate. So really not a lot of stuff against Craig's list here.
No.
Extirpate can potentially be good if he's able to snag something early off of a Spell Snare and Oath of Druids and then extirpate it. That can be a blowout. Yeah, there's really not a lot of amazing stuff to bring in versus this matchup. I don't know if this is a matchup he's not particularly concerned with. I think it should be on everyone's radar, though. Oath is very, very real. It hasn't been putting up the best of results, but I think that has a lot to do with the top players being very prepared for it.
Yeah. Another thing that Craig's got in his sideboard is the Pithing Needle, which is ultimately going to be symmetrical in this matchup because the only cards you would name are Time Vault or Jace, and Craig's going to want to resolve those cards.
Yeah, that's not really an exciting card to bring in here. I completely agree.
So Craig has an opener with a Black Lotus and a Forbidden Orchard and a Force of Will and some other goodness most likely, and he's keeping it.
So that's usually a really good sign for the control player when the Oath player opens up with so much mana and doesn't do anything.
Right.
It means at that point they're really trying to draw into what they need.
And Terrence has a really early Tolarian Academy. Double Orchard. Now that can get pretty dangerous if you don't have a threat right away, because if you start using those orchards early on in the game, giving your opponent 1/1s, then it's like all of a sudden it's like, okay, you have a 1/1. okay, now I have to tap 2 of these, and now you have 3 of them, and then I have to tap 2 again. Now all of a sudden you have 5 guys on the table. It's 3 turns away from death.
Yeah, it also invalidates the Jace plan. You can't really tap off here, give him 2 guys. At that point, you're going to have to bounce a token, get Jace hit for 1, and then Fate Seal, and then try and bounce a guy again. I mean, it's a long way to go before you get any activations off of your Jace if you're giving your opponent free Ghastly tokens.
Right.
Oh, going for some mana denial. And vamping in response.
Well, that killing that Mox turns off the Tolarian Academy.
Yeah, he saw the chance for some real mana denial there.
Notice that Terrence did not play another artifact, which he definitely would have if he drew it.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with this line. If he has more mana, this ends up being fairly inconsequential. Abrupt Decay is a little bit better than a Stone Rain. I mean, it's uncounterable. It can break up Vault Key. This Vamp could be very, very dangerous.
I think he's in a position where he kind of he had a little bit of gas in his opener, and he's kind of not drawing anything to do with it, and kind of just playing into the mana theory, where if the mana theory being whoever uses the most mana throughout the game is generally going to win the game.
Oh, here we go. Show and tell. Looking through, he's got Tinker, Spell Snare, a land. Does not look like he has anything good to put in.
Throw down a land. He's got a Jace. Throw down a land, draw an artifact.
He vamped last turn, so he may have Fate Sealed himself.
Yeah. That'll be a problem.
Yeah, this is very interesting.
Yeah, this game's probably over. Because, I mean, Craig's at 20 life. So, yeah. I would say it's basically a lock.
Yeah, and Griselbrand does a ton to invalidate those tokens because they can't swing in because it gives him 7 extra cards. You block once, gain 7 life, draw 7 extra. I mean, he really does put a halt to them attacking.
Yep. Show and Tell really just such a strong card.
Guy's Blessing going to the graveyard there. It's funny, when we look over Craig's list here, we can actually see this is his list from before the tournament. He had sent it via email, and it still had Memory's Journey. So this Guy's Blessing was a change on the day of the tournament, and he said that it was actually specifically because of a matchup versus Terrence the week before. What had happened was he had oathed down until he only had 5 cards left in his deck, got Griselbrand, and then Terrence untapped, and then had Mana Drain online to be able to counter Memory's Journey. So he was left with just the Griselbrand in play, and then Jace followed up, bounced him, and that was that. Yeah, it's a real problem. The thing that people do with Memory's Journey and Gaia's Blessing when they compare them is they tend to compare all of the strengths of Memory's Journey, and it's got tons of them. It can shuffle your opponent's library. It screws with their graveyard, so if they're trying to Snapcaster, it's a total blowout. It can completely shut down a Yawgmoth's Will. It's got huge utility versus Dredge. It's great versus top deck tutors, like if they vamp tutor, you just shuffle something bad into their library and you counter the vamp. So it's basically like a counter spell that disrupts them on so many different levels. It's blue, it pitches the force, it's got so many upsides. And then you look at Gaia's Blessing and you're like, well, it doesn't have any of that stuff. And people just kind of think, oh, so it's bad. What you need to do is look at the strengths of both cards and compare those instead of comparing strengths to weaknesses. And the strength of Gaia's Blessing is that you do not deck yourself. You do not lose to your own deck when you play Gaia's Blessing. Yes, it's a dead card for the most part. Generally, you're not happy to spend 1 and a blue to just basically cycle it and shuffle some stuff back in, but you're not going to lose the game when that card's in your deck in so many situations where you would lose with Memory's Journey, and that's what you have to question is how often is it just going to be a total lifesaver because you mill down until you've only got a couple of cards left in your library and you hit that Blessing.
Right, and that's one of those decisions that you really don't have the you really shouldn't be making those decisions until you've played the matchups a couple of times, and that really speaks a lot to individual players' play style.
Absolutely. There's the risk aversion and the the ability to see all of the upside of Memory's journey. But at the end of the day, Craig's gonna see a lot of those plays, and even with the added utility of being able to make, just these blowout plays with Memory's journey, he just doesn't want to sacrifice the games that he would have won otherwise. He really wants to be able to make sure if he's activating Oath, he's gonna win.
Now, orchard tokens do not fly?
They don't. No,
Okay.
they're just on the ground. There's nothing that they can do to really stop this Gristlebrand from finishing the job next turn.
Yeah, and that's gonna be a scoop. No, not a scooping type of player. I respect that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of making your opponent kill you. There are times where I don't think it's the right play. Generally, where there's no possible way that they could mess it up, then I generally will scoop and try and get things going. Like there's no reason for Craig not to attack with Gristlebrand,
Mm-hmm.
and that's one of those situations where I think it's totally fine to scoop. But if there's a chance that your opponent could see that you're not scooping and somehow overthink it, then there's some value there. But I can't even conceive of a situation why you wouldn't attack with Gristlebrand there. Like no matter what you're going to attack, so might as well scoop it up. But I mean, as we saw, it was only a few seconds.
Yeah.
Not really a major consideration for tournament time.
Yeah, but it's exactly that though. It's tournament time. So if you know it's basically a lock, then you might want to save an extra 2 or 3 minutes for the next round, especially in a control matchup like this, where the turns you're gonna have to have some decisions to make. There's gonna be a lot of decisions to make throughout the course of the game. A lot of shuffle effects. This isn't Moto, so shuffling does take a minute or two if you want to properly randomize your deck. But it's like you said, if you think there's a chance that your opponent can screw up the win, then yeah, you don't scoop.
Yeah, I've definitely had people completely punt against me in just the last few months. I mean, people just completely throwing it away as a result of me just not scooping.
Terrence going with the 6-pile shuffle.
Slightly unorthodox, as is his list. It suits him.
Now, the white is just for the sideboard, right? He doesn't have any main deck white. It's just for the Swords to Plowshares and Rest in Peace.
Yeah.
He's not running like a Auriok Salvagers or anything.
No Salvagers. It's also got the Shattering Blow as well, correct? Shattering Blow is the exile. So that's exiling artifacts, very relevant. I mean, exiling artifact or enchantment, right?
Yeah. One thing I like about Esper lists and Vintage is sometimes you can see like a lot of creatures with Enter the Battlefield triggers, and you can take advantage of that with Restoration Angel.
Yeah, that's an interesting list as well. I think I just misspoke there. The Shattering Blow is definitely just artifacts, right? I think it's just exile target artifact for 1 and then a hybrid red-white. Don't see a lot of that card. I know when it came out, people were excited about it, but really people haven't been sleeving it up very much. When I was running Esper, I was looking for something better than Disenchant, and I could not find any. Disenchant is sadly the best option for Esper right now. I mean, yeah, Shattering Blow. Yeah, exile target artifact, exactly, yes. So, Disenchant gets both artifacts and enchantments.
Wear Tear is interesting. It's a nice option.
Yeah, well, that brings you into you have red and white at that point,
Mm-hmm.
and that's at that point you're probably playing 5 colors because you're going to be playing blue, so you're either on like USA or, I mean, I guess you could be missing green at that point, but more than likely you'd have green for Deathrite, or at least like a single tropical island. You can pretty well power Deathrite and Vintage on just black, but it is nice to be able to gain the life.
Right. So Terrence has access to all his colors, double blue. He's got some stuff going on. Thoughtseize. Let's meet some misstep.
Paying for it. Paying the blue. Really doesn't have to worry about days. It's not really played very much. And he certainly knows Terrence's list, so he's not expecting it.
Terrence, considering the possibility of maybe using Mystical Tutor right now before his opponent gets a draw step, probably going to Mystical on the end step, hopefully for an Ancestral. No.
I think he's going to wait and see where this goes. If he can mana drain something, it can make that Mystical Tutor a lot better. He already has the Voltaic Key, so he actually has everything he needs in order to assemble the win here. He's got mana drain, Voltaic Key, Mystical Tutor, and Demonic, so he's going to be able to get Blightsteel, Inkwell Leviathan, or Vault Key, depending on how he plays this.
I like the Vault Key plan in this matchup. It doesn't turn on Oath, and it just has that inevitability. We're going to see an end step Vamp. Shuffling off the fetch. Card still in hand, just in case. It's nice to be able to shortcut whenever you can. Terrence going to allow it to resolve. Going to counter the card he gets instead of the card that looks for what he's getting. Which is, I think a lot of times that's the right way to do it. Because if you counter the Vamp, they can still just top deck whatever they were going to look for.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost always right to counter the Vamp, counter what they get. The times that it's not, it would be like Storm decks where they can go get an uncounterable card like Mind's Desire. And that used to be the real question is, what are they playing? Like, if they Vamp early, a control deck versus a combo deck, if they just grab Mind's Desire early, they can just wait until their resources are enough that they can just power it out, even in a really bad spot. There's not a lot you can do to stop that. Of course, the printing of Flusterstorm and Mindbreak Trap since those days has almost pushed Storm out of the format. I mean, there's not as much Storm nowadays. You see a lot more Gristlebrand Oath style decks, and even the Gristlebrand Oath that runs Dark Ritual is not popular right now.
It's really only the really dedicated players who are still playing Storm. People have been playing it since the beginning. They know all the lines. It's more of like a muscle memory type deck than it is a huge brain exercise, which it is for most people who try to play Storm. I mean, Reed Duke recently played Storm and did pretty well with it, but it's Reed Duke. He's one of the top players in the world. I think he just kind of sat down and looked at looked at the ban and restricted list, and was like, I'll take one of each.
Yeah, that's pretty much how that went. It looked like a fun list with some unconventional choices in there, but it did well for him.
Yep. So he mysticaled for counter backup because he's got everything he needs. So he just wants a little more protection. He's trying to drain something so that he can power it all out in one turn. Allowing the... I don't agree with that. I would have drained that, I think. Because he still has another blue card in hand to pitch to Force, doesn't he?
Well, it's actually really difficult. The Mystical for Force doesn't really protect him as much as he thinks, because Abrupt Decay can still blow him out of this plan.
Yeah.
So, let's see here. We can just run out an Oath. He can actually run out double Oath here if he has it. I mean, that's what I would look for. DT.
DT for Oath?
A lot of cards.
6 or 7. I mean, this would be a decent drain target. You get 2 mana. There you go. Flusterstorm. That's gonna do it.
Certainly gonna shut off the drain.
Yeah, but now he's not oathing this turn.
Now he could still force the DT if he wanted.
Is it worth all the cards at that point?
Yeah, Terrence is kind of bottlenecked on mana here. He has everything that he needs. If he had infinite mana, he'd just be able to win on the spot. That's not how the game's played. You got to deal with 3 mana and try and use it as efficiently as possible. And that Force of Will is not really helping him toward that end at this point.
Maybe right now he runs out the Voltaic Key.
To be able to get stuff out there before the Abrupt Decay.
Demonic. Probably gonna get Probably going to get an Ancestral here.
Yeah, I think that would have been the better line with the Mystical Tutor as well. I think Ancestral early is going to be able to push you ahead and allow your tutors to kind of find the optimal target because you've already drawn some of the pieces you need.
Yeah, on like a basic level, it's just being proactive instead of reactive, which generally will win you more matches. So, right now, he's deciding. I think he's probably going to go for the Ancestral. I mean, that's what I would go for.
He doesn't even have an artifact to tinker, so I think Ancestral's got to be the play here. Additional counter backup really isn't going to do very much.
It's a must counter. And it's going to give him card advantage. It's going to make the stack pretty interesting regardless.
Ancestral's one of those cards that's so cheap and so powerful. There are times where you're able to hold onto it until you're trying to resolve some other bomb, and then use that to build the storm count for a Flusterstorm and just get a total blowout, where you're able to use a single Flusterstorm to counter multiple of their counter spells. That can be devastating. So we've got the Battle of Spell Snare versus TheEndStep.
Is that what he searched for? A Spell Snare? I don't agree with that.
Is that actually what he got? I didn't see the card.
I haven't seen it in his hand yet. I don't think. Maybe it wasn't. You know, we could be.
And there's the Oath.
There's the Oath with the token. He's gonna force it.
That's the best that Craig can really hope for there, is getting that force out of his hand, leaving him with, it looks like just a Voltaic key.
Yeah, I mean, he knew the Time Walk was happening, so
He gets the untap.
probably
he has
has
another Oath to follow up. That would be
or a Jace.
Jace. Yeah, that's fun.
Brainstorm.
You can pretty much fate
Oh,
seal
you
him out
fate
at this
seal.
point.
Yeah, that's true.
You probably have to skip a beat at some point to get rid of the token unless he has an Abrupt Decay. That'd be worthwhile just to speed up the clock. You don't want to be picking up effectively one per turn. That does take a while. Though Jace is so good that it'd probably still get there.
Now, bottoming cards is frightening, because you don't have control over the draws. I don't know about fate sealing right now against a creature. I mean, that's a what is that, like a 7? That's a 8 turn clock against a 1/1.
Well, I mean, there's a good chance that Craig's going to be able to get rid of that token with an Abrupt Decay or something similar.
Yeah.
And he could always bounce it if he really needs to.
Yeah, and it more or less controls his opponent's draws.
Yeah, it would be the question of whether or not on that particular turn it would have been better to Brainstorm, because effectively did he not attack Jace?
No, I guess not. The 5 counters looked a little daunting. But Terrence's list is not likely to win off of combat damage, or at least not off of combat damage without infinite turns to back it up.
Yeah, that's an interesting decision. I mean, ultimately it's probably not going to make that mostly here.
Mm-hmm.
Craig is going to be able to bait seal him out. But yeah, it would have bought a lot more turns. That's the difficult thing. Like, Jace is so good versus the control decks because all of the counter spells, you just don't care. You just let them keep them because you're already ahead. There's nothing they're going to do. All you have to do is keep them off of cards that can somehow change the And looking over his list, I mean, there's very little that actually changes it. Sense's not a problem because it would allow them to skip the fate stealing element. You know, Dark Confidant, Inkwell, or Jace, those cards could be potentially something you have to handle. But all of the counters, all of the mana, the bulk of the deck is largely dead.
Yep. I mean, Jace being what is it? Sacrifice your Voltaic key for a colorless mana. I don't know. Merchant Scroll. That's another card I don't think I would run in Oath, but it's clearly a very good control card. You can grab a counterspell or an ancestral recall. He's gonna get a counterspell, kind of keep the game sealed up.
Yeah, Merchant Scroll is one of those cards. As a singleton, I'm not crazy about it, but definitely as a control player, being able to get Ancestral early is worthwhile. There's a question in Craig's list. If you can say turn 1 Merchant Scroll, turn 2 Ancestral, is that good enough? It's that type of question. I feel like the Oath decks, for the most part, really need to resolve an Oath or a Show and Tell pretty early. Otherwise, they're going to draw a lot of cards that are just not designed for the control route. Forbidden Orchard really doesn't have any synergy with trying to play control. And certainly drawing something like Gristlebrand is a completely blank draw. You're very rarely going to have 8 mana to cast him.
So he's extirpating the Oaths, most likely. Yep. And he gets to see... what is that? Drain, Hercule's Recall, Abrupt Decay, Misstep, Force, and what's the last one? Misdirection?
It looks like Misdirection to me, yeah.
So he gets to see that nothing's gonna... he's not gonna be able to do a thing.
All the counters.
So if I were Craig at this point, I would probably start... I would get rid of the token and start Fate Sealing.
Yeah, I completely agree with that line. I think it's the right play to just Fate Seal him out. He really only has a few things that he can draw that are relevant. He has counters for those. And if things get really bad, he could always pause on the Fate Sealing and start brainstorming again to pull himself back, ahead if he's actually worried about Terrence somehow outdrawing him despite the Fate Sealing.
Especially now that he knows he's not going to be able to Oath. He's really only able to play Griselbrand off Show and Tell, and he doesn't have the Griselbrand or the Show and Tell in hand. He doesn't have... maybe he's looking for the Time Vault to just make it a little easier. I mean, having access to looking at 4 cards per turn makes it tempting to try and find that.
That Abrupt Decay is actually really strong, because let's say that Craig did decide to go the Show and Tell route. Terrence could put a real crimp in that plan by running out the Voltaic Key, and then if Craig does risk it with a Show and Tell, he loses to a Time Vault.
Mm-hmm.
But having that Abrupt Decay is just so much insurance. I mean, it's almost inconceivable how he could lose here.
Yeah. Well, that's why I would use the Jace ability to get rid of the token rather than... and it's time to do that. Rather than using the Abrupt Decay. I mean, Planeswalkers really just... over the course of the game, the more turns you have a Planeswalker, the less likely your opponent is to win the game. Oh, forgot to discard.
And
so
from
now
here on out, that's the plan.
Now if he gets to keep it on top, he can fetch land.
Anything that he's got anything that he'd even consider counterspelling can just go to the bottom. You're not going to do any worse than a card that you'd probably counter. So
right.
There's no uncounterable stuff from Terrence's side of the board that could be relevant.
4, 5, 6, 7. So yeah, Craig got a full grip. Terrence 3 cards in hand. One of them being Force, one of them being Voltaic Key. Doesn't really have a lot of outs. I'd say I'm calling it.
Yeah, Craig would need to somehow kill himself.
Yep.
Which, I mean, I've had happen in recent history. I've actually had my opponents randomly kill themselves because of overthinking it from me not scooping. But
yeah, he could decide to play like a Mana Crypt and just take like 4 hits in a row. That would kill him before Jace kills his opponent, right? Because he would go to 8, 10, 12, -4. So yeah. Yep, drain the Jace.
I mean, it's really stretching. It would have to be something like Craig gets himself to 7 life and then has the opportunity to hard cast Gristlebrand and then hard casts him and draws 7. Like that's the type of thing I'm talking about. I mean, it is really long shot.
Yeah.
To the point where it's almost not even worth playing toward those angles. Sometimes it's the only thing you got. If you were going to do that, you'd probably... I mean, if you were going to make that happen, what you would need to do is mention to your opponent that they have enough mana to hard cast Gristlebrand, and then have that somehow stuck in their head, and then have them run it out.
Yeah.
But I mean, that would be like a huge Jedi mind trick. Highly unlikely.
Fetching for a crystal vein? Oh no, it's a basic swamp.
No. Yeah, Zendikar Swamp.
Yep. So, but I mean, what's the entrance fee to this tournament? $20?
30.
$30. I
30,
mean,
yeah,
you
we
pay
do some-
$30. You want to make sure you play to win, and you can't win if you scoop. You absolutely can't win when you scoop. You probably don't win from here anyways, but you definitely don't win if you scoop.
That is true. And he uses the Abrupt Decay on the Dark Confidant.
Probably has another one.
I think he actually used one that was face down.
Yeah, just like, guess what? I got it.
Yeah. Craig Fate Sealing actually looks at the card, which is generous. He actually didn't need to do that.
No. Was that a Mox something? Yeah.
Mock Sapphire, and we sacrificing himself to get the scoop.
Yep. All right, so that was a pretty grindy round 3. Round 4 is coming up next, and we'll meet you there.